Let's assume you are subject to a single audit. I know not everybody in the room is, so I won't dwell on this an awful lot. But we've talked about yesterday that the threshold for single audit increased from 500,000 to 750,000. Other things changed as well, a little less widely touted and promoted. But in essence, the workload of the auditors have been reduced. The amount of transactions that they have to examine to meet federal standards has dropped. Whether or not your audit fees have dropped correspondingly is a matter of some debate. I mentioned yesterday that even though the action of raising that threshold to 750K resulted in 5,000 non-federal entities no longer being required to be audited, we are still auditing 99% of the $500 billion that is expended in federal grant awards every year. If you're an entity that falls below the audit threshold, I said yesterday I would still recommend outside independent financial review of my financial statements. If you're a municipality, that may be a requirement under state law. It would be in North Carolina, my home state. And certainly if I'm a nonprofit and I depend on fundraising, I want to instill in the public's perception of confidence that even though I'm not required to be audited, that I submit all of my records for audit so that I can demonstrate to the public who's considering making donations to my agencies that their donations aren't being used to pay for my vacations in Jamaica, and that I treat all of those revenues according to the rules of my program. Even if you fall below the audit threshold, if GDOT requests a review of your financial records, you are obligated to make that data available to them. You simply can't say, hey, GDOT, we fall below the audit threshold, you have no rights to come in here. That is not true. If you look at your contract, you've already signed an agreement saying that GDOT has the right to come in there. That will be in every contract document. There are other audits besides the single audit that can happen. There's a beast known as a program audit. This would be circumstances where GDOT had reason to believe that you were misbehaving in your management of 5311 funds. And they can send a team out and conduct a program audit of your activities with 5311 monies. They are allowed to do that. They can also ask that 5311 be audited as a major program. And what does that mean? When an auditor comes in and does some of his initial work at your organization, he looks at a document known as a SEFA. That's SEFA, Schedule of Expenditure of Federal Awards. And he's looking to see which of those awards constitute a major program. And it's the major programs where the auditor will dive in and do tests of compliance and dig deeper in and review the financial transactions of that major program. Transit may or may not be a major program within your organization, in which case he'll only look at the financial statements for the transit program, will not do any tests of compliance, will not test any transactions to see if they're accurate. And if there is a level of concern on the part of the grantor agency, they can request that the program be audited as a major program. If that is the case, GDOT has to pay the additional fees that you will incur, telling your auditor, hey, in addition to just doing a single audit, we are telling you up front, before you begin your engagement, you must audit 20.509 as a major program. And your auditors will go, whoa, we got to revise our fee proposal if that's the case, because based on last year's audit, we think 5311 or 20.509, which is the catalog of federal domestic financial assistance number, was a minor program. They're going to say, hey, that's going to affect our workload, our schedule, et cetera, and we're going to need to be paid for that. GDOT has to pay for it. If they've asked to be audited as a major program, GDOT has to pay for it. And they got to tell you, we intend, or we want you to audit 5311 as a major program before the start of the fiscal year. So if they haven't told you by July 1, they can't audit you as a major program that year. But it is possible that they can do that. Every grantor agency has that right. The effective dates of the single audit threshold are kind of well behind us now. Audit periods are typically done annually. There are some exceptions, none of which are major. You have responsibilities in the audit. And this is a key one here. Preparation of financial statements and preparation of the CFA. That's your responsibility. How many people here have your auditor do that? Anybody? I see that happen from time to time in rural transit agencies because their accounting staff doesn't have the requisite technical skill to develop organization-wide financial statements or the CFA. They need help. They need the CPA's help. That's not the role of your independent auditor. Nevertheless, I've seen where they'll do it. You pay for it, and then bam, you have an automatic finding in your audit that you lack the requisite technical capacity to manage the grant because you're incapable of producing your own in-house financial statements. That is an obligation that it rests solely on your shoulders. You have to have, and usually what it is the county commissioners won't give your department enough money in the CFO position to pay for somebody who knows how to do this. You'll get an accounting clerk one who becomes the transit finance officer, and yeah, they can make general ledger entries, but they can't produce the financial statements. They can't produce the CFO. They don't have the skill set to do it. But someone at your organization has to have that skill set. When you accept a federal grant, you're verifying somewhere in your application, I'm betting dollars to donuts, that there's a certification form that you sign that says that you possess the requisite financial, managerial, and technical capacity to carry out the grant. And what you're telling GDOT is that I've got personnel and staff who can prepare financial statements for audit. And so you're lying to GDOT if you sign that statement and don't prepare them, and don't have the skill set to require the financial statements. And you'll get dinged as an audit finding every time you have auditors prepare the financial statements for you. We really don't want that to happen. That's going to impact future grant-making activity, be it GDOT or any other federal financial agency that gives your organization money. The other thing you're responsible for doing is keeping up with past audit findings. Now, in every audit report, you go to the end of the report, typically that's where you'll find the compliance supplement. And that compliance supplement nowadays should contain a schedule of findings from the current audit, almost always universally numbered in the fiscal year at which the audit applied. So if we're auditing 2018, the first audit finding would be numbered. Number 2018-01, 02, 03, 04, etc. In the FY19 audit, we will revisit prior year audit findings, and the auditor, you'll have to prepare whether or not the finding remains open or whether the finding has been resolved. And you've got to report that. And remember, we said yesterday, grantor agencies must now assess risk in making financial awards to your organization. One of the risk factors is audit performance. Leaving outstanding audit findings from year to year to year will adversely impact the competitiveness of your organization to receive future grants. You don't want to leave findings open. Here are some of the technical details that you need to do to prepare a CFA. It's really not all that difficult. Most of this information is available from the grantor agency or from your accounting system. Does anyone know the time frames for audit, for single audits? They're supposed to be done within 9 months after the close of the fiscal year. So that's March 31st for those of you on July 1, June 30th fiscal year. The audit's got to be finished. And then within 30 days after conclusion of the audit, you have to file a form with the Regional Audit Clearinghouse. And there's a standard form that you submit. The other thing that's important is the corrective action plan. If there is an audit finding, and findings happen, you've got to prepare a corrective action plan. And I want to go through that because I think it's very important. And I'll get to it in a future slide. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. But in terms of your responsibility, this is what your agency should be doing, is you've got to keep track with those past audit findings, prior audit years. You've got to include the reference, the audit number, that's how it's tracked, the status, whether it's been closed, resolved, a management letter has been issued by GDOT forgiving the audit finding, whatever the case may be. That should be in your summary of prior audit findings. And there are some special circumstances that you should be aware of. Sometimes audit findings are not correct. Auditors are human beings. They make mistakes. Now, usually, when you get your draft audit, you would detect any of those mistakes and remedy those mistakes before the audit is issued. But there could be a circumstance where the auditors do not accept your arguments and issues the audit anyway with the finding that you disagree with. I had a situation in Burlington, Alamance County, North Carolina, where the auditor treated Medicaid contract revenues as if it were a direct grant to the agency. It was not. It was a contract. And the auditor audited it as if it were a direct grant. And they were wrong. The auditor rendered a finding against the agency that was wrong. That agency had to rebut the finding and ask NCDOT to issue a management letter that they did not violate FTA rules in the treatment of that revenue because it was contract revenue, not a grant revenue. And NCDOT issued that letter and the finding went away. But auditors make mistakes. Don't be afraid to stand up to your auditors if you think you're correct. And if need be, if the audit is issued and you still disagree, send a letter to GDOT outlining your case and why you think the auditors are wrong, because ultimately it's up to GDOT to accept the recommendations of the auditor or to reject those findings. And they would do so in what's known as a management letter back to you, indicating their summation of the issue, their resolution of the dispute. And sometimes those issues can go on for years and years. At some point, there's a statute of limitations and you're excused, and that's documented in this slide. Those are fairly clear things. But the rebuttal or the corrective action plan, whatever the case may be, I think there are several things you should do. If you agree with the audit finding, then line up 3 things. 1, issue a statement that you agree. 2, assign responsibility for who is going to be tasked with corrective action. 3, name the corrective action. What am I going to do to resolve this? And number 4, provide a timeline. Name names, assign responsibility, assign a schedule. An entity that does that will mitigate adverse future risk assessments because you've shown the capacity to take an audit finding and correct it. It's almost like, you know, you get a speeding ticket, but if you go to traffic school, you can get the speeding ticket expunged from your record. Proper action on an audit finding essentially, in part, expunges adverse consequences in future risk assessments on your audit performance. Audits are available. If you're subject to single audit, understand that the audit report becomes a matter of public record. And anyone who asks for it, you have to give them a copy. Some exceptions to that rule, primarily tribal organizations, who usually don't want the public to know how much money they're making on their casinos, which sometimes is sinful. If you get your money through a pass-through organization, the pass-through agency has roles and responsibilities in overseeing your remedy of audit findings. So if GDOT is giving money to a lower tier subrecipient, it's GDOT, not FTA, that's going to be looking to see whether or not you're resolving these audit findings correctly. So any questions on audit? All right, it's 2 minutes early. It's 10:30. Let's go ahead and take our morning break, and we will reconvene here at 10:45.